necesaria, no, a la ponente.
Sí, ok.
Sí. Yo conozco a mucha gente de la que está aquí, ellos ya me conocen a mí.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning once again. Welcome to the next session of our presentations. I hereby thank Dr. Mathero Parashas for according us this opportunity to be here once more, to be with you, to interact in these beautiful presentations, in this beautiful city, and for a beautiful reason. This morning, I would like to present our presenter, who is Agni. Agni is the founder and president of the Biopolit organization, international organization. Biopolitic International Organization. They are supporting associations from 140 countries, and Agni is here today to share with us her expertise on biopolicy, uplifting values in society as a tool to eradicate violence against women, also looking at culture, education, and international cooperation. Agni, take the floor.
Thank you. Well, a greeting from my heart to all the participants. So many of the friends have left already, so I'm very sorry they're not here. But I wish to thank Mr. Palacios for the courage to continue. I've been coming since the creation of bioethics for 18 years, and we had tried hard to build step by step, but it's mainly Mr. Palacios who has worked so hard with so much dedication to promote the issues and to establish Gijón as a center of bioethical values. The presentations that were given the last 2 days were not only excellent, but they were a true enrichment because they provided the state of the art, they provided the data that are necessary, and showed to many of us who may not be on feminist issues ways to think. So since this is the last day of the meeting, I think we need to focus on what steps we need to take, how we have to visualize the future, because to tell you the truth, when I started with biopolitics and had to present in the United Nations in 1985, everybody was speaking about human rights. So why have we separated the issue as women's rights? If we speak about human rights, people should be punished on the basis of violation of law. So women, I was astonished to hear that even today, it's 1 of the 3 women have suffered from some type of violence. And this really creates a whole chain of thinking of what steps do we need to take. So I hope at the end of the meeting today, we may have the chance to propose, but I'd like to invite all of you to think of proposals, specific proposals, and hand them in to Mr. Palacios, so as to say what you think are necessary steps to expedite the issues to move faster. I will try at the end of my speech to give you quite a number of thoughts without claiming anything to be the true priority. So, Mr. Chairman, you'll allow me to speak on climate change issues because I feel that they relate with women's rights and violence issues that will occur. We are, as far as we know up to the present, the only planet that possesses bios, life. There may be millions of other planets, but we do not know it. So this precious gift, we have to make everything possible to maintain it and to assure that we get the appreciation and the knowledge about it. I believe strongly that with appreciation of bios, we need to influence leaders to establish this vision as a priority, since so much has been done today in our society about power and about profit. But profit in a sense that has been related to money profit. And this has led to over-consumerism, has led to arrogance, has led to wars, has led to numerous wrong pathways. Pathways that lead us now, and it becomes more and more evident that all these pathways lead us to an accelerated pace of climate change. I don't know how familiar you are with climate change. I had the opportunity to speak yesterday about Malawi and to hear how much they're already touched by the issue, because it includes every aspect of societal value. And arrogance against women and violence against women is definitely going to be affected greatly by climate change issues. Because climate change will impact, first of all, with its very quick melting of ice, we will have enormous floods. Many islands, many areas, many coastal areas will be covered by water. So these forced migrations, these forced economic problems will have an impact on women because they'll be sort of like the receivers of the stress. But in addition to that, all these conditions of climate change, like the tsunami, for instance, when it happened in Sri Lanka, it proved that men knew how to climb on trees, knew how to swim, but women had to look after the household, make sure that everything is all right with the elderly, with children, and they lacked also this basic knowledge for survival. So women victims were far more numerous than men. But this happens also in many climate change disasters, because desertification is here, it's happening, and so it's lack of water, lack of resources, lack of food, problems in agriculture. So all these have the immediate impact on women. If they have to fetch water, this has to be much further away, and it has to be carefully looked after to make sure that it's not polluted, because then it leads to series of diseases that happen because of that. It's amazing on how we let these problems occur. It's amazing, to tell you the truth. So we need to mobilize, we have to understand that it is every aspect of society, every aspect of human endeavor that has to change in order to lead to preservation of bios of life. And it is a deep bioethical issue to include every discipline. So, organizations for the rights of women have to start providing this precious information that they have gathered, that we heard, to create a major website where people don't have to search for hours. So I hope this comes out of this meeting. A website where we hear more about legislation, about actions taken in different countries. So all these paradigms should not be fragmented. They need to be included. But it needs to be also a feedback from every discipline, including literature, and the arts, because we have tools that could bring about changes quickly. The arts could sensitize people very quickly. It could involve children thinking. So the problem of this violence, which is unbelievable, 1 out of 3 women, I mean, this is beyond any kind of thinking, is easier tackled if we sensitize different groups. We shouldn't wait to speak about women's rights. I think if we speak about human rights, and within that to have the rights of women, then we can implement step by step. And because human rights, if somebody hits another person, if they wound the other person, if they cut their hands or whatever, they have to have the repercussions. And I think it's more used as an excuse, especially by certain leaders who see societal values in this way. So a primary goal should be to influence religious leaders. Religious in every religion where the arrogance and superiority of men is stressed by most of the religions. So I think leadership role has to enter as priority. And leadership of countries, the 20 people, 20 leaders meet, they have meetings of 20, and these issues of violence do not come up. It's a primary issue. It should be there because it's leading to a society of degradation of values. It's leading to a society of despair and arrogance. How do we move to save this tsunami of catastrophes for the environment or this blurred vision of values in our society? Of course, I'll come to education as a primary source, but I think we need to understand, if we build cities with better quality of life, if we create hundreds of thousands of jobs that relate to environmental protection, but also relate to protection of the rights of people, if we influence the business leaders, the state leaders, to think in new ways and to understand that these issues is like thinking of the human body. If one part, we call this, in biopolicy, we call it biodiplomacy. Because if one part of the body is hurt, the whole body suffers. If the mother of the children is hurt, then the children suffer, the whole society suffers. But these people do not relate themselves. They are like a different body. And they have to understand that these values, this knowledge, this implementation of law, the arts, and mainly technological progress have to be utilized to build the new bioethical dimensions. Bioethical dimensions are a tool to create the new societal structure. And this is what we need. Enough with the mistakes of the past. Enough with all these blindfolded actions and vision. What is needed more than ever, and for women organizations could take a lead in this, is to have the new vision that is required. And this cannot be forced. This has to be inspirational. So, for the youth, for women, for men, for leaders in business, leaders of state, a new momentum has to come in. The continuity of life is threatened. With climate change, every aspect of thinking, every aspect of human endeavor has to be channeled towards a vision of hope, towards possible choices that indicate that violence against women cause a degradation of societal values, cause cost of health issues, cause lack of communication and isolation, create models that are frightening models. So, not women's rights, human rights But also, to tell you the truth, in '85, when I was attending my first meeting at the United Nations meetings, I heard everybody saying human rights, and I was trying to say bios rights, save the environment, save life on the planet, start understanding how interdependent we are. But take the people with special needs, protect them, put them as a priority, have them to be involved in creativity. So it's not just women as an isolated group, but women can use the data, can have this forceful information available with one page, not 1 million pages, to leaders when they meet. The next meeting of the 20 leaders is for women who have more than 50% of the votes, to demand the new vision, the new action, ethical light. We have life. I want to tell you one little figure. Put the number 1 and put 20 zeros after that. 20. It's not thousands, it's not millions, it's not billions, it's not trillions. I wouldn't know how to call this number. But what is that? It's the reactions in the human body in one day. So all the money ever printed, all the literature, all the decision-making and superiority complexes need to disappear. And with more humility and with more joy, we need to appreciate the gift of life. So bioethics is the ethics of bios, of life. And women certainly deserve to be, as giving life also, they deserve to be a priority. So I wouldn't take the separation. I would say take the interdependence and the holistic view and build a future of hope. So I think this meeting could lead us to have the specific sites with the information of damages, the specific sites of dangers, but the specific sites of beauty also, because we have to show the beauty of who is more sacred to each one of us in our mind than our mother. And this is forgotten when we speak of violence. So people say, I don't want to be a feminist. I don't want to be involved. Well, they have to be involved. This is human rights. This is continuity of life. This is respect. And it is the way to say thank you. And we can't allow any leaders to leave out this vision. They have to include it. It may sound like a utopia. It is a utopia right now. It has to be a gradual process, but believe me, the main issue that we need to concentrate on is time. There's a ticking clock of destruction with climate change. There'll be so many damages, so much pain and suffering, and so many women who will be the majority of those who are impacted, that action has to be taken, not today, yesterday. Thank you.
Bueno, pues le damos las gracias a...
I would like to thank the speaker for her presentation. Thank you for sharing that with us. And now we have a debate. We have half an hour. If you want, you can take the floor. You can express your opinions. You can ask questions about the presentation. And I will be given the floor and to the different speakers, and we can have a relaxed conversation. If you want to take the floor, just raise your hands and get the microphone. In the meantime, while you get the microphone, if you allow me, I would like to ask the speaker the first question, if the audience allows. The speaker said that we need to speak about human rights and not about women's rights as such. For many years, we've been speaking about human rights, and you said that when you came to Spain, you were really shocked about what women are going through here in this country. And just recently, we've started discussing women's rights, and now we're told that we have to go back to human rights. Don't you think that this is a step backwards in our fight? Because we have just started discussing women's rights, and societies are becoming aware of what women are suffering.
I'm not against women's rights. And I'm certainly for it. And I think the issues are so numerous and so strong. But I wouldn't separate it from human rights, because there are so many people who think that, women, you know, their problem, whatever. There are many who are still narrow-minded. So I would try to have this data available, and the number one topic with human rights should be women's rights. But I wouldn't separate it as though women are not human. You know, I would put children's rights, so I would put first women's rights, and I would justify to say one of the 3 women suffer from violence. This is sufficient to mobilize. And then the specific data, so the specific buttons that could be pushed to see what's happening in every country, what violence has, you know, what kind of violence has been caused following various, excuse me, various disasters. So I'm not against women's rights. I'm very much for it. And I think so much progress has been made. But I'm afraid that if we isolate it, then we may go backwards, or we may lose time, because we'll find a big percentage of the population to be sensitized, like yesterday's the film, you know, the presentation for men who participate in speaking in favor of women's rights. But this will take longer. If it is an obligatory step under human rights, women's rights, you can't, I wouldn't allow anyone to speak about human rights if they don't speak about the violence against women. You see how I mean it?
Thank you very much for your presentation, Agni. And I would like to appreciate very much for inviting me to this conference, Marcela Palacios. And I think this conference is the greatest event in Europe and maybe in the world, event on bioethics. And I think that this issue which we study today in this conference, violence against women, is close connected with global bioethics issues. And feminist bioethics and gender bioethics proposed not by women. It was proposed by Van Rensselaer Potter in his book Global Bioethics, building on Olga Leopold legacy. In this book, he discussed many issues connected with feminist bioethics. And in Ukraine, we support model of bioethics, Potter's model of bioethics. And I agree with Agnes that violence against women has not only social dimension, as we discussed in previous days, but also ecological, global bioethical issues. It's right. And we need to go in this direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is it, you wish to have a statement from me? It's a statement, no? Some question, please.
Buenos días.
Good morning. Thank you very much for your presentation. I share with you that climate change is going to affect women in particular, and because of the role that they have as caretakers They are always there to support children, to support the elderly. They have that role of supporting life, daily life of people. That's why I really thank you for introducing this aspect to the discussion. Here, we speak about ecofeminism as well. That is the idea of bringing the struggle for the environment with the idea of women's rights. And I think that was a very interesting discussion that you presented, especially the idea of human rights and then women's rights inside that. So I would just like to support what you were presenting. But there's, however, something that I would like to clarify. Maybe you could elaborate, or maybe this is just my reflection, because you said that you were shocked about the situation in Spain, but we are also shocked every day when we see that every woman who is suffering from violence or who has been murdered, that also shocks us, and we're horrified. But I think that out of this conference, we also need to see how Spanish women have worked very hard in a short period of time to make violence visible, and the problems of women, women's issues visible, and violence amongst them as one of the top priorities. This is the landmark that women's organizations have achieved. We've made it visible. I don't think that if we're looking at other figures from other countries, Anglo-Saxon or Northern European countries, our figures are not that different or worse. They are very similar. But I think that feminists in Spain has managed to have an impact on legislation, and that's why we have figures and we make it visible, and we are definitely struggling every day to have that law enforced, and I think that many times they can be seen as a reference point for other countries. I just wanted to clarify this so that people who have come to this conference from abroad do not leave the conference with a somehow distorted view of what the situation in Spain is and what Spanish women have done. As you have such a holistic view and global approach, I think that that's an important comment, that and see how the work that we have done and the legislation that we have achieved may be helpful for others too elsewhere. Thank you.
Zach, I agree with you completely. I wasn't isolating the problem for Spain. I was, on the contrary, I was very impressed by all the groups and the hard work and the vision and the action, which is very important. They have been implementing the new legislation, the court decisions, the media. So I was impressed, and this is why I was so thankful to Mr. Palacios for bringing together this group, but also for pointing out the international aspect. We cannot just look at a little spot of the globe. We need to think of the interdependence of these values. So this is why I try to stress the need for a new vision, stating the problem, creating a dialectic approach of thesis, antithesis, synthesis, giving the paradigms for every country and what it has done. And I was greatly, you probably take the lead in Spain in some ways. So this is not to criticize any specific country, but to see how all this is a tool to create inspiration, to create new momentum in the next meeting of UN, in the next meeting of the 20 leaders of the world, to push to have these issues as priorities. Because I was stressing the 1 out of 3 women for this reason, so that those people understand they have to get votes, because this is probably the only way their mind works. So if they think that the women are the majority maybe for votes, they will start planning differently, hopefully. So technology, the arts, the new legislation, influencing leaders in every respective field, political leaders, intellectual leaders, business leaders, then involve the youth, like it was beautifully said in those discussions, get the new teaching in schools, new participation, and also not create this overly difficult situation for men. I have young people in my office, and the lovely, lovely young people, And the girls have were recently married, and the men try to follow very much the participation in the new prototypes. But I think society is probably forcing them too fast to change. This change for men has to be guided as well, you see, so that everyone should be enthusiastic, participating, building the new. So that respect, I don't think we have to abolish everything. Patriarchal society does not mean violence. It can mean respect. And I think in the family, someone has to be sort of like a leader. If the father is capable and a good paradigm, why not? But it doesn't reduce the value of women. I lived with this prototype in my family. My mother was outstanding. So, but she would always try to keep this balance for the children, respect your father. So let's not destroy everything. Women's rights, yes. Coordinated action between women of all the nations, changing international organizations. Why are we wasting so many years? UN spoke about human rights since the beginning. Why do we have, I understand that we were forced to speak about women's rights, but let's go back to speak about human rights and demand women's rights to be the priority. Excuse me, I don't know if you agree, but I try to share with you. Yes, please.
I'll go back to the topic of what Dulce said. I'll go back to what Dulce said. As we have some time, I think that maybe we should go back to some of the things we are discussing and that you are presenting. I'd like to say that I'm surprised when people come from other countries and are shocked or concerned about the degrees of violence that women suffer in Spain, because in their countries sometimes the rates are far higher. This happens often to us. So many times people do not even know what is happening in their own countries. And when we look at the Eurobarometer, in Europe, Spain is one of the countries with the lowest index of gender violence. But the difference, I think that Greece is above, France is above, and some other countries as well, and especially if we compare Europe with other countries in the world. But the problem is that here, as the previous speaker was saying, has been made visible, and that's a political achievement. And you have already replied to this, but I think that we have to continue thinking about this topic. We've spoken about human rights, but as you were saying, women will not seem to be considered as humans. And many times what we see is that when we speak about human rights, women are not perceived as part of that. When they said men are born free, etc., except for black men, for example. Yes, we see that, and this has happened to women as well. There are statements being made, but then the reality shows that those statements excludes some people. The reality is not like that. In any case, I think that your holistic view has been very important, because feminism by definition is a holistic movement, but sometimes when you speak about a particular topic, we tend to lose sight of everything else. So I think that Maria Teresa Fernández de la Vega, during the first day, she spoke also about violence in a framework of general violence. This is also a very interesting contribution. The same thing goes for your presentation, that we open our point of view and the reference framework, and that we have to understand that we're fighting for life, for abuse, and that this is going beyond a particular topic. And I think that this is very important, that it's very interesting that we bring both things together. But we have to think that building, as you were saying, building a new world doesn't mean destroying everything from the past. We share the idea. But, of course, the past is also difficult to manage, because the past sometimes speaks about traditional families and cultures, religions that have contributed much to humankind, but they also have the dialectics and the contradictions of many negative elements we need to overcome in those models. So, to summarize, that's a very good starting point, that thesis. And the antithesis has been brought about by the feminist movement, and we can come to a different result and conclusion.
Yes.
Let me correct something. I never mentioned that the problems are in Spain. I didn't separate any country. On the contrary, I was impressed by how many organizations in Spain seem to be very active. So please, let me correct what was misunderstood. Now, regarding the holistic approach, I think that we speak about one of the major problems on our globe. And in view of climate change, this will be aggravated a great deal more, either because of lack of food, greater poverty. Millions will have to migrate when their country is covered by the water. All these issues, we have to start being prepared. We have to be prepared, you see? And this is why I think that women have the wisdom to think of women's rights, but also to prepare the ground. So if it is under human rights, women's rights, all these aspects of mobilization become immediately global and primary issues. This is how I see it, you see? I don't undermine the other. I don't know if it's clear what I'm saying. So education is a tool, and let's use technology. Right now we use it extensively in biopolitics. We have series of courses that we give with e-learn for free. So how to reverse unemployment, how to create green cities with zero pollution, climate change issues. We are opening a course. So if a course was given before, and a year, 2 years later is given again, a great deal of research is giving the new vision, the new paradigms. So I thought that one of the primary issues, and I'd like to cooperate, I was planning to speak with Mr. Palacios, should be the women's rights course. But this is taken by people in 140 countries. So we have to include paradigms of all the countries that we know of. It requires long study, it requires long preparation, but it is, the bioethics of CIB is a pioneer and should be the leader in this kind of effort. This is thoughts, just thoughts. No obligations of anyone. Just I feel the obligation to share these with you.
Do we have more questions?
¿Hay alguna otra pregunta
Yes, or comments? Yes.
o comentario?
Sí, sí.
Yes, can you hear me? First, I'd like to deeply thank you for your presentation. I think that this was an outstanding conference. For me, I've enjoyed the whole conference and all the panels, that's for sure, and all the topics that we have discussed, and all the things that we have discussed about women's rights. But I have to say that something was missing for me, and that's what I found today in your presentation. Because I think that your presentation helps us see our problem, not just my individual problem as a woman here, but the problems of the world, the problems related to climate change, of all the things that we see, that the things that are happening, and we're really in a situation of despair. We don't know how to address those things. And I've had a positive view from you in this utopia of changing the world and changing it ourselves, and that we achieve equality, etc., and that all people have equal rights. But I think that you have expressed everything so nicely, seeing women's rights inside human rights, etc., all the things that you have already explained. But I would like to make a comment. I'm not sure whether this is the right place, but I'm intrigued by this, and maybe you have something to say about it. For example, the G20 meeting and the UN and all the meetings that we have to see about, to see issues, to discuss climate change or the situation of refugees, etc., those things that are also part of human rights. What are all these G20 meetings and UNs and whatnot? I get really anxious when we see even in our situation and the issue of violence against women, we are trying to do something. If we compare that with the world, there are so many things that have to be done. And in this globalized world, we cannot just stay in our own small circle, circles of scientists, of circles of activists. So I'm not sure whether I'm expressing myself properly, but my question is, what about these politicians? Because that's a problem. It's a problem for climate change. It's a problem for everything. And I think that everybody has to do something. But sometimes I think that's so difficult that we do not know where to start. It's not impossible, of course. We need to do something. But each of us will have to do their share. And in this case, politicians and the G20 people do not seem to be doing their share.
Think of this progress of the last few years that has tremendous beneficial dimensions, but they have also created an inverted pyramid of society. Nothing is in balance. So what we need to do is try to put a white base down, and each one of us to put a speck of dust, the little bit we can do from every part of the world to build a vision of hope, a vision of respect, a better quality of life. And for me, this is a deeply ethical issue. This is bioethics. We have to build the society of hope. So all these dimensions of problems have to be discussed thoroughly and have to lead to new thinking and new inspiration. So biopolicy is addressed to everyone, but mainly also to leaders, because this is where the crisis has started. They thought of power, they thought of more money, they had thought of how to impose themselves, and it is exactly what we need to change. If we succeed in assuring continuity of life on our planet, if we build a stable society, women's rights will come to more balance, and they could play a key role at the core of everything. Because this is a good way to measure the culture and to measure justice and to measure policy. It's a way, it's like a thermometer to measure the temperature of the civilized society. So I wouldn't isolate it to any one country. I would only need to have the combined paradigms of efforts that lead us to understand the problems and lead us to get new planning. And education is the tool. With internet, every individual in every village could start creating, something I forgot to tell you. In several meetings, there was big discussion about loans given to women. It was for Indian women more. And there was the bank, very important, the banker was there, Grameen, I think it was called, with $20 loans. They changed all of society because those women were empowered to start with very small projects, but immediately they increased the results, whether it was a small farm, whether it was a small garden to cultivate. So then they went back, returned the money, and got bigger loan, and so on. And it brought a huge change in society. So we have to think of numerous ways to empower women to get out of this desperate situation where sometimes they're stuck in. The mechanism is not easy. We have to search in our mind continuously. And this is why I was saying a website is like a bank of ideas. And from there, we can each give the feedback and build something better for the future. Hopefully, hopefully. But every day is a present. We have to make the best use of it. And women can do that. They can do it from the arts, they can do it the way they bring up the children, they can do it by societies that create women's rights. I don't know, this is the answers I've tried to search for.
Thank you very much. I think this has been very, very inspirational. I would like to point out it here that if I fail to mention it, that the issue of climatic change for us is not about the future, it's about today.
Exactly.
We are coming from nations that are very, very poor, where 74% of the population live below the poverty line. We are coming from nations where we are talking of 85% of the population depending on agriculture. It means we depend on rain. If we cannot have rain, we have no food, and we have more problems, and we have more complications. So just last year in my country, we had hunger. Why?
Exactly.
Because of the climatic change. We did not have rain, and people harvested nothing. And this year, the effect and the impacts of hunger continue because of the effect of climatic change. So we really beg each and every one of you. It does not only take the leaders, but it takes our individual response. This is a global responsibility that requires individual participation.
Absolutely.
Let us do something to change the world. At this point in time, I think we are more or less in time. We are more or less in time. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much for your questions and everything. It has been a very inspiring discussion. Thank you very much, Agni, and thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. This is a great meeting, and it's a great opportunity to bring about changes. It's not just to be informed. Marcelo, you will have a very tough time ahead.
Yes.